Why does Arcane feel deeper than most shows? Why do Vi's words and Powder's plea linger in our hearts long after the credits fade? I think it's because Arcane did not cope with the heart of its story. Arcane understood it. To cope with the heart of a story is to scratch the surface of an emotional conflict, to get the drama aesthetic of it. So it's kinda like fast food, tasty but nutritionally empty. Whilst understanding the heart is to delve deep into the emotional issue, exposing its nuances, making it more real, visceral, and cathartic to watch. So it's more like a healthy, home-cooked meal. Though most stories aren't usually exclusive to one or the other. It's more like a scale, you see. A film can be more of either, based on factors like writing skill and personal wisdom. However, I think Arcane is further to the understanding side because it has traits that display just how much it understood the heart of its own stories. So let's see what these traits are. First of all, Arcane shows the perspectives of their villains, which is a good start because at least we get to hear their motives. But Arcane doesn't stop there, as you may well know. The writers immerses us in their struggle, flaws, habits, and insecurities, so that we may not only sympathize and feel sorry, but empathize and feel their whole slew of emotions. The heroes weren't idealized. The villains weren't demonized. They were people in difficult circumstances, not black and white figures. They were gray with the conundrums of humanity, which we, the audience, also experience, and thus they feel real. And you can tell how masterfully a show paints their characters with empathy when instead of focusing on glorious battles or pretty animation scenes, you focus on what that scene means for the characters. Because by that point, you are feeling their feelings, not the aesthetics of the scene. And to illustrate this theory, ask yourself, when you first watched the fight scene between Vi and Silco's goons, were you more excited by the cool fight scene, or were you more tense for Vi's safety? Were you more, "Hey, nice punch, wow, that's so smooth," or were you more, "Huh, no, yeah, what's taking you so long?" Unless your answer is the former. Do you see what I'm trying to say here? You can really feel the tension in that scene because we care for Vi and feel her tense emotions, which can only happen if she feels real, human, sincere. Therefore, you won't feel this tension for shows or films or blockbusters who paint their characters in black and white, as they're not humane. They're idealized action figures with plot armor so thick that you choke when a villain has the audacity to think they stand a chance. By showing the villain's perspective and zeroing on the humanity of the main characters, they all become unique individuals. Vi is not just another punchy steampunk female protagonist, and neither is Jinx another Timu Harley Quinn. We feel their heart, we root for their goals, and whimper when they fall, because humane sincerity invites humane sincerity. So, if showing the humanity of all the main characters is so emotionally rewarding, why aren't all shows doing it? Well, many tried. Few were good, many were meh, and I have no idea how much were abysmal, because you can really tell if a writer doesn't get the humanity of their characters in the opening few minutes. The dialogue's unnatural, the formulaic tropes goes wee-woo, 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 and the humane sincerity component is so absent that if you squinted, you would have thought that you were watching a sponsored infomercial. It is ridiculously easy to spot and thus drop such shows. But why does this happen? It's simple. Not every writer knows how to research the heart of their story. Researching is complicated, messy, and emotionally challenging. So writers often latch onto a single emotion or attribute of the character and build on top of it to fit their idealized fantasies, rather than researching, self-reflecting, and confronting uncomfortable emotions, even past trauma or present weaknesses, to feel the pain on how the character comes to acquire such attributes or emotions. Because even being nice is never a simple trait. A character can be nice from experiences yielding comfort and reassurance, or even from those of fear, guilt, trauma, and even ignorance. It's always messy, and thus simplicity is pure fantasy. Good thing Arcane gets this though, I hope, because you can really see these subtleties when the characters display their traits. Vi speaks kindly to Powder, not because she's simply a kind person. She doesn't speak kindly to Milo or Vander, and especially not to any random person. She speaks kindly out of fear, trauma, and desire to give her little sister a brighter future, which could be tainted if she spoke to her in her typical Vi manner. And the emotional example would probably be Powder's plea after the slap scene. She is not crying just because her sister left her. Her sister was the only person who truly believed in her, who she looked up to, trusted, and felt safe with due to a library of experiences growing together. There are layers that Powder lost when Vi left, and this is the part that I think proved Arcane knows Powder's humanity. However, to deliver these layers, the writer needs to research the little habitual behaviors and stages that leads towards that particular attribute or emotion. They need to know the process, the journey, and not just the destination. And I'm not sure if Arcane did their research from external resources or if they dug deep within themselves, because they knew that kind of pain and process. But they certainly captured the complexities of the process especially well for Powder and Vi in Act 1. So, if you have experiences or habits in people-pleasing or protecting someone you care about, those first 3 episodes may be the episodes that hit you hardest in the heart, because you are familiar with the process those emotions and attributes may have come from. That is how a show should hook an audience, because once they push the process to the absolute limit, like the end of Act 1, our hearts may experience the catharsis, the absolute devastation or triumph the writer wants our hearts to feel. And that is, or should be, the goal of any writer of a serious drama. That cathartic feeling once others understand the heart of your story as you intended. The writers of Arcane wanted you to feel the heart of a protective big sister who is torn between being practical and being tender, with her little sister who is torn between being inadequate and the desire to prove herself. This is the heart of Arcane, and once you feel it, nothing really beats it. because it feels as if you've lived a character's entire life journey. An emotional peak that could seldom be beaten by the peaks of life itself. Because thankfully, most people, hopefully, don't go through tragedies like Vice or Powders. Yet, because of the writers of Arcane, we got a chance to feel those deep emotions, which we could then reflect upon, have in our memories as life lessons, and grow after the film without needing to experience the tragedy firsthand. Growth. Emotional growth. That is the reason the heart of a show needs to be well researched and crafted like Arcane. Because if enough shows do this, the majority of humanity could be more experienced with emotional turmoils, patterns in tragedies, and how to overcome them. Thus, hopefully, become more mature and wise, resulting in a more stable, knowledgeable, and harmonious future for humanity. Plus, when people feel the deep emotions from a story you meticulously worked on, it yields such a satisfying feeling because you are sharing a human depth with someone else. And I don't know if it's a joy from recognition, a sense of camaraderie, the peak of humanity, or from finally realizing that you're not crazy for feeling such deep emotions. But in essence, it is such a deep and fulfilling emotion, which I think is the feeling money was meant to but couldn't really buy. Thus, the existence of rich collectors who keep collecting and broke artists who keep trying. It is such a fascinating pursuit in life, but the hurdle of it, for writers at least, is that most of the time we can't deliver the depth properly, which is what Arcane spectacularly overcame. How? Good delivery. You can't force an audience to eat a broccoli, no matter how deeply healthy it is. But you can season it ridiculously, plate it nicely, and feed it in increments until the audience eats it raw. This analogy translates to Arcane's use of pretty animation, cinematic framing, and a drama domino of timing and pacing, which are ideas I discussed in depth in the videos of my Flowers of Arcane Act 1 analyses playlist, if you'd like to check them out. So, if you pair a well-researched heart of a story with good delivery, you get shows like Arcane. And Riverdammit, does the world need more stories with such pairs? But a story that copes with the heart of its characters isn't always universally bad. It is more like a trade-off. And I have more than a few analogies to reflect these trade-offs. Coping with the heart of a story is like eating fast food instead of vegetables, which comes from researching and understanding. Coping is like cutting a knotted shoelace instead of solving the knot. Coping is like living on debt instead of working for a living. Coping is like looking at the flowers whilst the world burns behind your back. But wait, I have more. Coping is like the war films that cheer and dance and glorify the act of killing the enemies with utter disregard of who they were, their lives, families, dreams, and humanity. Coping is like getting drunk to avoid the pain of a wound instead of healing it. Coping is like blind happiness that could inadvertently make one step over others because they do not understand the cost to earn true happiness, which is peace, inner peace. It ain't flashy, but your needs are met, your desires are earnable, and your heart is content, which to get, you first need to research and understand your heart. Coping is short-term. It is entertainment. And of course, entertainment is useful, as there are times where we just want to eat junk. But entertainment should not be mistaken as cinema, or the dimming of hearts will fester, the sense of empathy will shatter, and thus the catastrophe of humanity will occur. Arcane is not entertainment. Where was the enjoyment when Powder cried in the rain? Where was the amusement when Silco cradled her in his arms? We felt pain, and yet we loved it, because Arcane understood the heart of a little girl who only wanted to be enough, to be loved, and yet is twisted into a villain by a tragedy caused by no other than her own heart. That is cinema, or what it should be, at least. Thank you for your time and for listening up to this point, especially if you watch the other Flowers of Arcane Act 1 videos. This will be the last one, since after Act 1, there is Act 2, as well as Season 2. And let's just say, it garnered enjoyment for me. And if a story that was once cinema starts giving out enjoyment cookie points, I'm going to have an opinion. Hundreds of pages of opinions, to be imprecise, which may never see the light of LED screens. But I'll try my best to bring the best ones to light. So until then, timbrely yours, Bookshelf Beaver.